Hello, YouTube. This again is about Moscow and the paranormal panorama of the Russian capital. And today I'll tell you about the so-called house on the embankment, Dom na Nabережной in Russian. It's a block-wide apartment building on the banks of the Moskva River in downtown Moscow, Russia. I think the better term in English would have been dwelling on the embankment, but let's go with what others have been using. Until 1952, it was the tallest residential building in Moscow. It is considered an example of constructivist architecture. It was best known as the place of residence of the Soviet elite, while many of whom were arrested and executed during Stalin's Great Purge, and we'll get to that. The house on the embankment is not only the first and most famous, the term is to use, clubhouse in Moscow. This building is still considered a record holder for the number of mysteries and enigmas, secret passages, torture chambers, reportedly, and notoriety, again, because of almost every third inhabitant of the legendary skyscraper. The elite was arrested, convicted, exiled, or shot before and during the Stalin's rule. The apartments were luxurious for their time. Telephones, central heating, and high ceilings were standard. At the time, most Muscovites had to make do with communal apartments, and having lived in the Soviet communal apartment, I have to tell you, it's not something that you would enjoy. Most human beings would not. The building also featured a sports hall, tennis court, kindergarten, library, laundry room, and a kitchen from which meals could be ordered for collection by hungry residents. Many residents and their families were detained during the so-called Great Purge under the reign of Joseph Stalin in the late 1930s, to the extent that the building was dryly referred to as the House of Preliminary Detention. During this period, it was known as having the highest rate of per capita arrests and executions for any residential building in Moscow. Fully a third of its residents disappeared during the purge, and this is sad when people suffer and families get torn apart, sent to labor camps, and so forth. Although the elite was engaged in the same when it came to other people in the Soviet Union after 1917 takeover. But it's still sad, and people should not live like that. Professor Yuri Sleskin published in 2017 a book called The House of Governments, a saga of the Russian Revolution, in which he records the fates of about 80 tenants and their families. He noted that some of the apartments in the government building held up to 5 successive sets of occupants between 1937 and 1940, as senior officials were arrested for execution or imprisonment. Many people are interested in the history of the walled-up apartment in the building. There have been many dark legends about the banks of the Moskva River since ancient times. Bolotnaya Square, which was a place of public execution, was located in the immediate vicinity. Noble estates were also built on the embankment, but their owners died reportedly as soon as they had a housewarming party. The old-timers just shrugged their shoulders, saying that it's quite easy to explain the strange pattern because they built houses on the burial site. What else can those who decide to live on the bones expect? In the Soviet times, it was rumored that residents and guests of the legendary house regularly hear crying, whispering, and sometimes old music. It was on uh, the Embankment in the 16th century that notorious Maluta Skuratov, leader of the henchmen who terrorized the Russian population, well, that's where he kept a torture compound. Ivan the Terrible, chief of the Oprichniki Guard, allegedly conducted his inquiries and torture there. This hypothesis is confirmed by terrible findings. Russian archaeologists come across shackles, human remains, and skulls during excavations. The gloomy history of the building raises many questions about the history of its 11th entrance. Well, there is no such entrance in the building. Immediately after the 10th comes the 12th. A barely visible door separates them. According to legend, the premises of the 11th entrance were placed at the disposal of the special services, the Soviet secret police, for wiretapping and surveillance of difficult, so to say, residents and their guests. In addition, there is a theory that Soviet secret agents and foreign intelligence agents who came to Moscow, and of course who worked for the Soviet regime, they were hidden in so-called invisible rooms, away from the enemy espionage agents' eyes. So one of the likely guests of the mysterious entrance, it was rumored, could have been the Soviet spy Gerhard, sent to South Africa. Now, if we talk about the victims of the house, then the first one was the firefighter Tuzhilkin. He was the head of the Moscow Fire Department at the time of the fire during the construction of the skyscraper. The fire began to spread across the construction site in 1930 as a result of disregard for safety regulations. But it could not have been any other way. The tight construction deadlines, numerous alterations to the project, total control and pressure from the party leadership are the true causes of the incident. But someone needed to answer for it. So the wrath of the Communist Party fell on the main metropolitan firefighter. The chief's daughter was immured. And there is a walled-up apartment reportedly in the building that belonged to this chief. He was arrested at work, after which the security officers, meaning the secret police, came home for their daughter, for his daughter. But the girl locked herself in the apartment, threatening to kill anyone who came to her with her father's revolver. So the secret police officers decided not to take any chances and disconnected the apartment from all communications, and also walled up the door from the outside so that the rebellious daughter could not leave. The neighbors heard cries for help for several days, but no one helped that girl. Everyone was afraid to attract attention to themselves. They say that the moans of a Muscovite woman are sometimes can be heard at night, but it is not known exactly where this walled-up apartment is located. And I don't have any more information about this story, but maybe it's just an urban legend, but there are so many there. So for those who want to learn more or see it, if you happen to be there in Moscow, this residential complex of 505 apartments and 25 entrances is located on the Zamoskvorechi Island, a district connected with the rest of the city by two bridges, Bolshoy Kameny Bridge and Malый Kameny Bridge. The ensemble covers an area of 3.3 hectares and comprises 8 buildings with a varying height of 9 to 11 floors. It overlooks the Serafimovich Street and Barsenevskaya Embankment. The relocation of the Russian capital from St. Petersburg to Moscow caused an increased need to house civil servants in Moscow. In 1927, a commission decided that a building would be constructed in the neighborhood opposite the Kremlin, which had been occupied by the wine and salt court, an old distillery and excise warehouse. That's where the building was raised later. During the Tsarist era, that is before the destruction of the Russian Empire, the area had been used mainly as a mushroom market. The new apartment block was completed in 1931 as the government building, a residence for the Soviet elite. Previously, they had lived mostly in the Kremlin itself or in various luxury hotels around Moscow, such as the National, Metropole, and Laskutnaya. It was designed, that building, by Boris Iofan, who lived in the building from 1931 to 1976. He also designed the Palace of the Soviets, but it was never built. So, I already told you about the present day 505 apartments, but some are used as offices. There's a theater, a movie theater, restaurants, retail stores, and an Azbuka Vkusa supermarket. Not dissimilar to the situation when it was originally built. Although other areas of the city have much more luxurious apartments, the apartments in the house on the Embankment are still sought after and very expensive because of their location and the prestige associated with the building. Apart from the descendants of this former Soviet elite, the building is also home to pop stars and expats, cultural figures, film producers, and so forth. A small museum was opened in 1989 on the first floor of the building, containing exhibits about its history as well as providing a more general social history of the 1930s, 1940s. Apparently, there are 25 memorial plaques on the facade of the building. From 2001 to 2011, an 8-meter high Mercedes-Benz logo was placed on the roof as advertising. And in the 1980s, an initiative group arose among residents to create the house and the Embankment Museum. The museum was opened in 1989 in the former flat, I think of the guard of the first entrance. The first director of the museum was Tamara Ter-Yigazaryan, who had lived in the building since 1931. The exhibit was enriched with personal belongings, photographs, books, and documents, and other archives. They created everyday circumstances of the 1930s, lists of tenants, victims of Stalinist repressions, and participants of the Second World War were also made. And in 1992, the house on the Embankment gained the status of a state museum. In 1998, by resolution of the Moscow government, it was even the status of the Municipal Museum of Local History. And Olga Trifonova, the widow of the writer Yuri Trifonov, who wrote about this building, by the way, very, very popular book, she became its director. Also in the mid-1990s, again, memorial plaques to the residents of the building were installed. And in 2014, the museum house on the Embankment became department of the Museum Association of Museums of Moscow, which you can see if you are there. And from 2016, it became part of the State Museum of the History of the Gulag. That's the name for the Soviet concentration camps empire, so to say. So it's part of the paranormal history of Moscow, and I'll bring you more stories about the Russian capital, and you can find much more on my channel too. Thank you for your attention to my work. Please sign up to my channel. Please help my research if you can. You'll find the links on how to do it in the description to this video, and expect more videos.